So I started my poetry unit this week, the third week of student teaching, and it's going pretty well so far. On Monday, they did a quick write about whatever their perception of poetry is, and we talked about how they might be, well, hopefully some misconceptions that they might change by the end of it. And we're going to go back to that entry at the end of the unit and see if anything has changed. And they did blackout poetry that day to kind of help them get started just with the poetry process and looking at poetic language and seeing that poetry can come from everywhere, basically. And then we did some stuff with lyric poetry, and we've done figurative language, and they're really getting great at looking at a poem and understanding the figurative language that comes out of it. And then today, or on Thursday, we did paint swatch poetry. So I brought in different paint swatches from Walmart, and we talked about how to describe a color. If you had to describe a color to someone that has been blind their entire lives, how would you do it? And we talked about that, and they said all these different ways that they would do it, how they would describe it, and then we talked about how it's really difficult to do so without using figurative language, without using a lot of simile and metaphor. And then they each got their paint swatch, and they wrote about that color and describing that color to someone that had never seen color before. And so they had to use their other four senses and use figurative language to do so, and it produced some really, really beautiful writing. So it was really cool. And then today I introduced their poetry project that'll be due on March 11th, the last day of the unit. And it's a project that my cooperating teacher does every year for a poetry unit. And I really liked it, and some of the examples from past years were really great. So I wanted to try it. Basically, the students have to find 10 poems from other authors and respond to them in some way, kind of like a multi-genre project. Like, they could write about the poem, or they could respond to it with a drawing or a photograph or a podcast, or pretty much anything goes. And then they need to include at least 3 of their own poems, original poetry that they've written during the unit. And they're welcome to include more, obviously, but they just need at least 3 poems. And they can do this in a number of ways, but it looks like most kids are going to be doing it in some sort of like journal-y, scrapbook kind of way, which I think is cool. And we're going to be working on that in class some days and doing some looking at poetry books and researching poets and stuff, so that they can kind of, get a feel for what poetry they like and what poets they like, and hopefully kind of get there in a way that they don't realize how much research they're actually doing for it. One thing I'm having a little bit of trouble with is classroom management, which I think is everyone's kind of biggest problem, I'm sure. Coming in halfway through the year and being expected to take control of the class and for them to, actually do everything for you. They're not terrible by any means. It's just the noise issue, I guess. It's a pretty relaxed classroom in the first place, but they are used to my cooperating teacher. So if she begins speaking, then they get pretty quiet. It takes them a second, but I think I just have to figure out a way to get there. It's been pretty good, though. And I've been thinking a lot about the whole, relationships, relevance, rigor kind of thing, and I'm definitely working on the relationships part. My students got back today. I wrote back to them to their first letters that they wrote me, and it's great. It's especially helpful with my ESL students who are really afraid to actually speak up during class, and even just to say that they do need help and that they don't understand what's going on. But now in the letters, they are actually telling me about themselves, which is really cool, and they've begun to talk to me more in class, which is great. Other than that, we'll see how the poetry unit goes next week, but hopefully it'll go really well. But other than that, I had a great week, and I'm excited to go back.